All right, so I'm just gonna go over the basics. This is gonna be repetitive for most of you, but for some of you, it'll be new, but I promise you, I will try to make this as entertaining as I can. So here's the syllabus. We're gonna go over what it is, how it started, focus areas, how members can be eligible, what their benefits are, some prohibited activities, and then a timeline that you'll be following. All right, so what is AmeriCorps? It is a network of service programs each take a planned and evidence-based approach to improve the lives and foster civic engagement. The State Commission, that is where we are from. Oh, I didn't even introduce myself. I just jumped right in. Sorry, I'm Vinny, like Vincent, like my cousin, Vinny Pinellas for the State Commission. I'm joined here by other State Commission staff. That Ramos, who is our administrator. I saw Lori Barrows, who is also a program officer. I saw fellow program officer Carissa Herb and our recruitment officer Taraya. So we welcome you to this. Sorry, I just jumped right in. Okay, so I just wanted to show you I put pictures here of recent AmeriCorps members doing work. This past October, DEP members, the left picture, participated in the Pinelands Water Monitoring Challenge. So students got hands-on experience on lake sampling and learned about the Department of Environmental Protection's Shellfish Program. United Advocacy Group held a MLK event this past January. We had Jamira Castro from UAG. This is one of her pictures. I thought this guy was the cutest thing ever. They collected, they made meals for homeless and comfort kits for foster youth. And some people from NAC, also like their neighbor program down the road joined, but this guy was super adorable. I have to include him. And then the last picture there, NAC, who I just mentioned, their program is weatherizing homes in 3 South Jersey counties. So they're actually like in the homes, putting insulation and et cetera. It was very exciting about that because we hadn't seen that before. So those are a couple of our programs. All right. So AmeriCorps is not a job or an internship or a volunteering opportunity. It is service. You'll be recruiting members. The lingo is very important to call them members. They're not employees, interns, or volunteers. You're developing a program to have members fill in. You're not developing a program to have members fill in vacancies. Like you're utilizing their service. Members are making direct impacts in their community. And our goals are to get things done and develop members for future opportunities for life after AmeriCorps, and then ultimately strengthening our communities. So a little history of AmeriCorps. Bill Clinton signed the National and Community Service Act of 1993, creating AmeriCorps and the Corporation for National and Community Service. You'll hear that referred a lot. But in New Jersey, the New Jersey Commission on National and Community Service was created by executive order in June of 1994. So a year after that. And then AmeriCorps started in the Department of Education, but then in 2004 was transferred to where it is now in the Department of State. The actual commission, the board, is responsible for a number of important activities related to the disbursement of about $10 million annually in community service and volunteers and grants. If you are curious about our commission board members, one of them will be highlighted in each newsletter that we put out, and the newsletter we started in October. So the funding tree, money grows on trees, right? It all starts with the federal government. And then there's a couple of programs. We are AmeriCorps State and National. Then there's the NCCC, the National Civilian Community Corps, and then VISTA. If anyone was on before when Connie Mercer was on, she mentioned her VISTA program. They're all sort of the same, like community impact, going in, education, sometimes disaster services. But we're going to concentrate a little bit more on state and national. Overall, they're like very similar, but then there's some requirements for members and et cetera that are a little different, and we'll get into that specifically for AmeriCorps State and National. So as the state commission, we fund programs throughout the state, and we're going to go into that a little bit more here. So we're all over the state. I mean, it'd be nice if we can get people to completely fill the state, but this is where we are right now. We have about 20, nearly 20 programs spread throughout the entire state, each concentrating on a different focus area that we'll cover really quickly in the next slide. Some of these programs have been with us since the very beginning, that 94, 95 type area, and some are very new, like NAC, who I mentioned earlier. So focus areas. Follow one course until successful. Now, Yvette will probably go into focus areas a little bit more in her portion of the presentation. But I put this picture in because just as a little tip, when you're developing your programs, you know, I think a lot of new programs want to do so much. You know, they've done the research, they figured out how they're going to impact the community, and they want this many members doing it. And then they want to track like 15 different performance measures that we'll go into a little bit more, but it might be worth it to just have one or two and really concentrate, especially as new programs. So many of our programs are serving in schools and supporting students by improving attendance and engagement. Some programs are really developing like employment opportunities or preparing people for financial stability. Over the course of at least my time with AmeriCorps at the state level, members have really covered thousands of acres of public lands to conserve natural habitats and promote like pure air and water. This is someone, where is he from? He is from NAC. I think he's from NAC. God, I just keep using the same people, sorry. When you're thinking of developing your programs, ask yourself what your goals are going to be. What are the outcomes of those goals, and what are your service activities? Next week, CREES, the Center for Education, actually, Daniela will know exactly what CREES stands for. I always forget that acronym, but they're from Montclair State University, and they'll be going over logic models and performance measures. That'll be next week on Wednesday, the 22nd, if there's any confusion. All right, member eligibility. Is that what we're on? Yeah. Okay. So, like here on the screen, if they're 17 or under 18, they'll need parental consent. Proof that there's a high school diploma or someone's working towards the GED, a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, and then the birth certificate. So when you're an operating program, you'll be creating member files, and these things will be required in there. All right, so background checks. We have a compliance officer named Vanessa McCall. She's not on the call today, but once you're part of the portfolio, she will meet with you directly to go over background checks. One of the most important things to really remember here is under no circumstances should any individual be serving without these background checks conducted. And you'll need the official approval from our compliance officer. This also includes any staff that are part of your grant. So if as program directors or financial directors or anyone that will be, they're part of their salaries will be taken from the grant, they need to also be background checked. Were you going to say something of it?
No.
Oh, okay. So something to keep in mind when staff changes, those new staff members would also have to be checked before anything was done from the grant. So member benefits, we're just going to go through some of them here. Childcare is available and health insurance for full-time members. And also, now that you can correct me if I'm wrong, but not just full-time members, but say abbreviated time members that are serving in a full-time capacity. So if you have like a summer program and summer programs, we'll get a chart on the next slide of showing the number of hours required for the minimum program. But if they're serving in a summer program, their total amount of hours are say 300. If they're serving in a full-time capacity, they would qualify for childcare and health insurance.
That's
For
at the, that's at the, it depends on the agency if they wish to do that.
Oh, okay, so
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
optional.
it's
It's
optional for the
optional.
agency, yeah.
Um, then we're gonna go a little bit more into living allowance and education award directly, but during time of service, members will qualify for loan forbearance and interest accrual stops. So that's going to talk about the living allowance more in detail. And you'll find this actual chart in the NOFO that was distributed. And you'll see some things may have changed. I just want to reserve this more. I want to mention the living allowance because it's a modest living allowance. And I think those were always the challenges that we hear when recruiting members. We'll work with you to figure out when you're about to apply with your budgets, but this is pretty much non-negotiable. You have to work within that minimum and maximum total living allowance per MSY. So interesting too, a benefit is that educational award. So I have here in green the 23-24, what you're here for. You're here to plan for the next program year. In red is what we are currently in. These amounts are what you call it. They are associated with the Pell Grant for the fiscal year and usually approved in the fall. So trying to, like, if you have members serving different terms and when they sign their member contracts, this is like if you have current members, if you're a current program member, you'll see that those are the amounts per slot that they will be earning. Now you're preparing for the next program year, the amounts change. So just keep in mind now, the program years typically start, say, September to August. While your 23-24 members are serving and you're operating in that program year, sometime around September, October, a new educational grant structure will be approved. So we just want to make sure that sometimes it's confusing, especially when you have different programs operating in different program years. Does that make sense? Or did I like totally mess that up?
So no, you didn't mess it up, Vinny. Let me just state though that because this can be a little misleading. Because so this past October, the Pell Grant amount just increased. What does that mean for the programs and the members? The way that the Pell Grant, the way that it works for the Education Award is those members will receive the Education Award that was in place when the program got awarded to us, the commission. In most cases, that is in July or August. So for instance, right now, those members that are serving at this point for this year, this current year, will actually be getting the education award that is in the red frame instead of the green frame. Okay, so that's how that's working. So they're actually going to get 6495. Programs that will start next September will get that 6895. Okay, so that's how that works. All right.
Right. It's easily to be confused, say a new program. I
Yeah.
discovered this with new programs that started this current program year. They're doing their own research. They're trying to figure out what they're gonna, instead of looking at the NOFO, they're looking online. And then they might be citing, say for this current program year, like something for
What's in the
next
green.
program year.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it could be easily confused.
Yeah.
As
It's
far
always
as
best to check with us. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Also, just the last couple tidbits on educational awards. Members have 7 years to use that award. They'll earn it upon completion of their service. And if the member is 55 years old or older, that educational award that they've earned can be transferred to a child, a grandchild, a foster child, and that can be held up to 10 years.
Right. It has to be satisfactory performance during that year too. They have
Yeah.
to complete their hours. Yeah.
Right. At the end of, right.
Right.
So here's our little cowgirl with, I love this.
I love this.
It's so funny. So just remember, members are providing direct service they're creating a direct impact. Now, some things to think about as far as prohibited activities, there's a list. But remember, anyone associated with AmeriCorps they're private citizens. They can exercise their rights as citizens, but not on AmeriCorps time when they're serving and not wearing any AmeriCorps gear. That's the bottom line. Also here, I wanted to talk about duplication of service. So remember, and non-displacement. Your members are not taking the place of something that already exists. Members are trying to create an impact on something that in your application you've identified as a community need. So whether that's, if there's any gray area here, we can always talk about it individually. But ultimately, like an example, say, is someone in an educational program that member is in the classroom, that member is not the teacher, that member is just helping support the students to make that change, whether that's engagement or their grades or attendance. They're not there to actually take the place of the teacher. That's one of the examples. Ooh, I wasn't ready yet. Okay. And then also I wanted to mention that members cannot supervise other members. Members, they can be leads. Say if you have a member that served in AmeriCorps already, they might know how to do something in e-grants. They might know how to fill out the timesheet on Encore. But they're not supposed to be supervising other members. So here we're gonna go through a timeline. I was excited, I found like an interesting new graphic. So planning, this is where we are right now. You're in the application phase. You're like, you want to find a need, see how your members can be used to create a community impact, and then recruitment and application screening and selection. What is relevant experience necessary for that position? And recruitment can be all year round. We actually, on this call right now, is our recruitment officer, Toria. She just started this week, and she's going to start meeting with all of our existing programs to assess needs, successes, challenges. Then we are going to orientation, training, enrollment. You should be developing your members for life after AmeriCorps. Developing members to foster civic engagement, also leadership skills. We want to make sure that they're benefiting from their experience here. Supervision and evaluation. During the service year, members need to be evaluated with their service terms. So at least once at the end of their service, but if full-time members would need a mid-evaluation as well. Communication is key here. I find that most successful programs are in touch with their members very frequently. And then we go to supervision and evaluation. I'm sorry, reflection and recognition. This is when you're about to exit. And just see, we also, at the end of the year, the State Commission will hold an end of year celebration, because we want to recognize those members that have completed service. I know a lot of individual programs will actually have their own as well. All right, so I put a picture of a concert here because I once had a boss that said less talk and more rock. And what she meant by that was there were so many meetings, but she didn't have time to get like things done. So, but unfortunately with AmeriCorps, well, we will leave you alone as much as possible. There are mandatory meetings from that we require. We're the grantee, you will be the sub-grantee. So we have mandatory state commission events such as Starting Strong. That would be for program directors or organizations that have applied. Members are actually required to attend state commission events as well. beginning, like we call it launch to start off the program year, and I just mentioned the end of year. We have monthly program director meetings that you're required to attend, and your program officers, I am a program officer, Lori and Carissa, monthly catch-up calls just to see individually how you guys are doing. There's also reporting requirements. There's quarterly reports in Encore and fiscal reports in Encore. And then monitoring. Monitoring, if you're a new program, you'll be monitored automatically. But if you haven't been monitored in about 5 or 6 years, and you've been part of the portfolio, you'll be monitored as well. And that's a nice way of saying, like, almost like an audit. We're not checking to see that you're doing anything wrong. We just want to make sure that everyone's following the AmeriCorps requirements. Here's the pledge. I thought it'd be nice to play it. Oh, you know what? I didn't share sound, so you probably won't hear it. But I wanted to include the pledge. A lot of programs will start with this. We do it at our launch program for all the members. We've done it virtually the past couple of years. Hopefully one day we'll be able to do it in person. I find that it's very inspiring to hear everyone raise their right hand and repeat this pledge. Sorry, I didn't share my sound. I'll send it to you or I'll put it in the chat. And then that's it. Are there any questions? I went through really quickly, but for most of you, you've experienced, or at least know a lot of the 101. For anyone new, we're available. You can ask questions. I think the nitty gritty is going to be coming up right now. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Vinny. That was great. Thank you. I especially like timeline is good, by the way. That was important. So yeah.
Yay. All right.
Okay.
So I'm going to, oh, 1 second. Pull up yours.
So while Vinny is doing that, let me just say that we are doing things a little bit differently this year. We're trying, generally in the past, we have invited potential applicants to apply for operating grants. This year, we're trying a pilot program because one of the things that we've learned is that we've had programs that think they understand AmeriCorps, write these great applications, they get funded, and then when it comes time to implement the program, they're just not able to get it off the ground. Even with all of the support that we give them with our program officers, there have been recruitment challenges. There are challenges within their bureaucracy. So there's a lot of reasons, or they're not able to get the match they thought they were going to get. So we have been experimenting with planning grants for the past couple of years. We think that we're at a point where we've gotten better at doing those and preparing programs and applicants for a full-blown operating program. So what we decided to do, and we've been checking with other state commissions on what they do and those kinds of things. And there are some state commissions that will only fund an AmeriCorps program in the beginning with a planning grant. So the requirement is 1 year of planning grant, they apply then for an operating grant for the following year. So we're going to do that as a pilot program this year. So if you are new to AmeriCorps, you will be applying as a planning grant. And I'll go into the details of that. If you have had experience or have been funded by AmeriCorps for operating grants or prior planning grants through us, then you can apply as a recompeting program. So I'm going to go through both of them. They're in different sections, but first I'm going to start going through the first section, which has to do with things that are common to both that you're going to need to know. So section 1 of this presentation will deal with the New Jersey Commission's grant information and timeline. I'll go through, how to submit your application and all of those things, and some of the things that are common to both. And then I'm going to talk about planning grants, and I'm going to go over the criteria for planning grants. Those of you who are here as recompeting programs, you can take a little coffee break for 5 minutes while I go through that criteria. But after the planning grant presentation, then I'm going to go into operating grants. Now, I'm not going to go through all of the criteria for selection and operating grants, because if you are recompeting, you should already have a good sense of what that is. You will need to read it on your own. And of course, we're here to answer questions, but it can be quite involved. And I recommend to everybody, please attend the session on the 22nd, particularly if you're applying for an operating grant, so that you know the ins and outs of theory of change, evidence, logic models, and performance measures, because those are the sections that will get the most points. So let's go to the next one. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about section 1. Here's our timeline. So today is our general TA session. It is recorded. So if you know of any organization, if you feel that, you want to share this information, the recording for today's session will be there. Or if you want to revisit it because you feel that you may want to review it again or whatever, it'll be available on our website. Also on the 22nd, as I mentioned before, CREES, which is the Center for Research and Evaluation in Human Services and Education and Human Services out of Montclair State University, they will be doing that TA session as well. Again, it's a deep dive into theory of change, evidence, logic models, and performance measures. On March 16th is the notice of intent to apply. You will submit to us your notice of whether you plan to apply or not. This is not a binding thing. So if you decide after you submit saying, yeah, I'm going to apply, and then you decide, you know what, I think I'm in over my head at this, or this is harder than I thought, or whatever, for whatever reason, you don't, it's not binding, but for us, it gives us an idea of how many applications we should anticipate, how many readers we'll need, and those kinds of things. So, and then on March 28th, it will, and it also, the other thing is sometimes I send out additional information. So if you submit for that notice of intent to apply, I'll have your name and I'll know that, to send that information to you as well. On March 28th, that is a due date for recompeting applicants and for the planning grants. So new and recompeting, that will be your due date, March 28th by 4 o'clock, and it has to be on e-grants. Okay. If you have problems with e-grants or whatever, just contact us. We'll try to walk you through it. Sometimes you have to go to the help desk. I recommend that you not wait for the last minute because e-grants can be glitchy. Sometimes it'll be down. So you don't want to have to take that stress on if at the last minute. On March 29th, we'll start our staff review of the applications and budgets. That's for new and recompeting only. On March 31st, we'll have a technical assistance session for our readers. And then on April 4th is the formula applications due to AmeriCorps for continuations only. So if you are here just listening in on this, but you really only have to submit a continuation, your due date will be April 4th. Yesterday, I sent out those instructions for those agencies, and those agencies know who they are at this time. So, so there's that. And then on April 5th, we'll start the reviews for those as well. We will have our Reader Arena session on one of these dates in April, 17th, 18th, or 19th. And then there are generally revisions that are recommended for new applicants or recompeting applicants by the Center for Research by CREES. And our readers. And so if there are some changes that are recommended or required, particularly in budget areas, you will have to then submit those back to us by April 28th. And then the May 3rd is the commission board vote on selected applicants and continuations. And then I'll be submitting those. Our due date to AmeriCorps National is May 17th. So that's our timeline. If you have any questions on that, just let us know. Next slide. Okay. This formula NOFO will fund the following type of grants: planning grants. So planning grants are available to agencies that are new to AmeriCorps. It provides funds for 1 year of planning and development of an infrastructure and application for an operating grant in the next program cycle. Planning grants do not include funds or slots for AmeriCorps members. So if you get funded for a planning grant, your planning grant will start September 1st of 2023. Okay, you will then be in training and kind of working with someone from the commission to help, to help you identify the benchmarks that you're going to be needing to kind of develop during that year, so that you can submit for formula the following spring. Okay, so that's the idea with that. Now, if you don't get funded during the formula that spring for the following September, you can always come back and apply again the following year. But the planning grant is only for 1 year, and it's for the amount of $85,000, up to $85,000. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in that section. Operating grants funds are cost reimbursement grants or formula fixed grants. Right now, we only have one formula fixed grant, and they happen to be a professional development grant. But the other, so we don't really have a lot of formula fixed grants. The cost reimbursement grants are available for programs that are currently in their 3rd year of a 3-year AmeriCorps program cycle. And you should know who you are. I've kind of talked about it at our last 2 program directors meetings. Operating grants are also available to applicants that have completed a prior planning grant, and funds are used for program operations and the living costs of a cadre of AmeriCorps members who will perform service. So one of the big distinctions between an operating grant and a planning grant is that a planning grant does not have costs allocated for AmeriCorps members. Okay, you only do the operating funds that you need and administrative funds that you would need for the planning process. But there will be no costs, no expenses, and you will not be given any AmeriCorps members for that 1 year of planning. The members will come with the operating grant. Okay. Formula fixed grants. I'm sorry. Formula fixed grants are operating grants that have completed 1 full 3-year cycle of an operating grant. Formula fixed grantees do not have to demonstrate a budget and match. However, in order to successfully operate the program, the applicant will need to provide additional resources. You just don't need to report those to us. Okay. So generally how that works is, you'll submit to us whatever the amount is that you're requesting, and you'll submit that on a budget, and then we'll just, send it back either approved or not approved. However, during the program year, you will need to let us know, because you're paid basically on the amount of hours the AmeriCorps members have done up to that point. At that point, then we will then, reimburse you for, those expenses. But you don't need to show us a full-blown budget. Okay, next. The other distinction for fixed amount grants is that you can't apply for it until you have completed at least a full 3-year cycle of a cost reimbursement grant. So you need to have finished, 3 years at least of a cost reimbursement. And then if the following 3-year cycle you want to apply again as a fixed grant, you can do that. Okay. All right, NOFO section. So this NOFO, or Notice of Funding Opportunity, has 7 different sections. Okay, the most important ones are the first 3, and then the other ones are kind of resource information that you will need to review in order to submit a successful application. So section 1, if you're a planning grant and an operating grant, you will need to read that information. If your section 2 is only for planning grant applications, so if you're an operating grant or it's submitting for a cost reimbursement, recompeting, formula fixed, you do not need to read that section. Section 3, operating grant applications. Again, you do not need to read the information on planning grants, only those that pertain to operating grants. And then the mandatory supplemental information, that is where your concepts are defined. So for instance, you will have a good definition of what the different tiers of evidence are. So there's pre-preliminary, there's preliminary, there's moderate evidence, and then there's strong evidence. And you'll read what all the requirements, how they define those tiers of evidence there in that section. That will also give you definitions of other things like what does it mean? What does displacement of a person mean? How does AmeriCorps consider what that means? What is the definition of the same program? There's various things you need to read through that so that your understanding and their understanding are the same in terms of some of the concepts that you will see in the NOFA. Section 5, 2023 AmeriCorps State and National Application Instructions. You will need this to understand how to put your application into e-grants. And both planning grants and operating grants will need to go through this, okay? Section 6 are the AmeriCorps State and National Performance Measures. So there are two types of performance measures. There are standardized national performance measures that they kind of give you, or you can do your own applicant determined performance measures if there's none there that you see that kind of fit with your program design. So you know, I would look at those. Those basically kind of like break down the focus areas, and they need to be your performance measures. You need to have at least one aligned performance measure, which means at least an output and an outcome. And then if you want to add additional performance measures, that's fine, but you don't want to do so many that it becomes unwieldy and, you know, just not feasible for your program to do, because, you know, with your performance measures comes a schedule of instruments that you're going to need, like surveys. You're going to need to, you know, do sign-in sheets and those kinds of things to capture your data that you're going to need for those performance measures throughout the year. So you don't want to, you know, overburden your program with so many performance measures that it's going to become, you know, an administrative nightmare. Planning grants do not need to develop performance measures right now. Okay, so you do not need to worry about this, but I would start looking at them because during the planning year, you will definitely be working on developing those performance measures for your application. Okay. Section 7 is your applicant operational and financial management survey, and that will be due from both of you. Now, that OFMS form is basically just to find out what the stability of your program is, your financial management systems, and whether or not, you know, it's something that we need to know if there's any issues there. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the focus areas for the NOFA are generally 6. These 6 have been in place for like the last 15 years or so. So they haven't really changed. Generally, when you're applying for a competitive, and we have 2 different NOFO times when you can apply to AmeriCorps, to our office through our commission. One is the competitive process. That NOFO comes out in the fall, and the one that we are working on right now, which is the formula, and that comes out kind of like around this time, and is generally due in the spring. The differences between those two are that the competitive, you compete at the state, and then when it's selected at the state level, if you attain 75 points, it goes on to compete nationally with other state commission submissions. So it is a more rigorous process. It's a more difficult process for us to get programs, good programs. So generally what we recommend is that you run an AmeriCorps program for several years, and we require that programs that have been in operation for 6 years, that they compete at the national level, so that we can continue to grow AmeriCorps programs with our formula funds. The formula only competes at New Jersey level. You attain 75 points, and then that's how you would get selected, okay? But your planning grants as well as operating grants will be developing their program design based on 1 or maybe 2 of these focus areas. So they're economic opportunity, education, healthy futures, veterans and military families, disaster services, and environmental stewardship. In addition to these, for the competitive process, when that NOFO gets released to us, AmeriCorps National kind of identifies what their priorities are. So they may be actually looking for something, for instance, on climate change. All right. And they'll let us know what their priorities are. Now, for the formula, we have not determined any priority areas for New Jersey, okay? We just kind of want to keep it a little on the simple side, and just allow programs to apply for what they think they can do best, to address the needs of their communities in New Jersey. So we just leave it at these focus areas for now. Okay, let's go to the next one, and I just want to give you an idea of what some of these are. So economic opportunity, improving the economic well-being and security of underserved individuals. A lot of this has to do with things like, and you'll see in the performance measures, there are performance measures developed under things like helping people identify housing, helping them get mortgages, all of those things that have to do with housing, financial management, financial literacy, learning financial literacy, getting jobs. So those are the kinds of things that generally fall under economic opportunity. Next slide. Education, improving educational outcomes for underserved people, especially children. AmeriCorps is particularly interested in program designs that support youth engagement and service learning as strategies to achieve high educational outcomes. So this can run the gamut from uh, kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade generally. Some of our programs, they assist by doing a lot of mentoring in high school to kind of get those students into like life after high school, whether it's through vocational, through college, or whatever that is, but kind of preparing them for the next steps in their education. And then some of them are working with young students, tutoring them, trying to get them to read by third grade. Those are some of the things that that the education focus tends to focus on. Next one. Okay. Healthy futures, support for health needs within communities, including mitigating the impacts of COVID-19 and other public health crises, access to care, aging in place, and addressing childhood obesity, especially in underserved communities. So pretty much Healthy Futures runs the gamut on health initiatives. We have a couple of programs that work in this area. Right now, we also fund something called Public Health AmeriCorps. So some of our programs that do health are actually funded under that. But this basically is the area where, you're, again, you could be doing low-cost immunizations in the communities. It could be screenings. It could be anything that's basically assisting individuals to pursue their own health goals. Okay. Veterans and military families, we do not have any programs right now in this area, but it's basically improving the quality of life of veterans, military families, their caregivers, and survivors. So and that could be in anything that could be giving them referrals, taking them to, helping them access social services, education, job training, anything, but the focus being again on kind of re-entry into the community or helping their families while they're in the military. Disaster services, helping individuals and communities prepare for, respond to, recover from, and mitigate the effects of disasters and increase community resilience. We had a lot of interest in this and a lot of services during times like Sandy and so on. But lately, in the last couple of years, we just haven't had as much dealing with the disaster services at this time. But again, it's definitely one of our focus areas. Okay. And then the last one is environmental stewardship. We are seeing increased interest from applicants in this area, supporting communities to become more resilient through measures that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, conserve land and water, increase renewable energy use, and improve at-risk ecosystems, especially in underserved households and communities. A lot of education. We have a watershed ambassadors right now that is doing this. We have a planning grant out of Rutgers Co-op Center that is currently moving towards doing something in the area of waste, food waste reduction. So there's a lot of different areas or directions that environmental stewardship can also take. Okay. And we also have NAC, which is again also working in weatherization and so on in that area. Okay, in order to apply, pretty much it's open to anyone has a 501c3, as long as it is not a for-profit entity. So it's pretty open in terms of eligibility to apply. The other thing that you will need is you need to have charities registration certificate current. If you're an education institute and you're not educational institution, you do not need that, but you would need to have some kind of a waiver from there. And again, so we would provide that guidance to you in the future. Okay, go to the next one. Okay, so estimated award slots, amounts, MSYs, and periods of performance. So let me just define for you what an MSY is. An MSY is AmeriCorps jargon, basically. It means member service years. Um, and what that is what is known in the world of labor as a full-time equivalent. So a full-time equivalent would be, what is the equivalent of a full-time person or a full-time AmeriCorps member? So full-time for us, for our AmeriCorps members, is a completion of at least 1,700 hours. And I say at least because it could be more, but generally it's 1,700 hours for them to be able to earn their education award. So, and those 8 MSYs can be a configuration of less than full-time slots. And we'll go over that. But for instance, if you bring on half-time members at 900 hours and you're trying to apply for 8 MSYs, then that would be the equivalent of 16 half-time members. So the maximum, the minimum that you can apply for as a cost reimbursement would be 8 MSYs. We don't want programs that are that much smaller because there's a lot of administrative burden in running an AmeriCorps program. And if you have less than 8 MSYs, it's really not, you're not going to see the impact that you're hoping for. And that AmeriCorps really is hoping to see. If you're a planning grant, you will not need be applying for MSYs. So you don't need a maximum and a minimum. But the maximum for cost reimbursement or formula fixed grants would be 15 MSYs. We have reduced that from 20 because a lot of our programs were running into programs with recruitment in the last 2 years, often primarily due to COVID. But if you are a recompeting program and you are currently at a higher cost per higher number of MSYs, and you've really been able to kind of to fill those slots, all of your MSYs, we will consider higher than 15. Okay, you just need to have some kind of a conversation with us about your ability to do more. We can fund higher. Okay, so but that's what we're kind of setting the norm at. Maximum funding for planning grant is 85,000 and cost reimbursement would be for 15 MSY is about $405,000. And that's using a formula of 27,000. I think it's 27,000 it is 27,000 per MSY. Okay, so how you would do that is you would multiply, for instance, 15 MSYs times 27,000, which is the cost per MSY, to get that $405,000. Okay. For planning grants, it's just a fixed amount of $85,000. The period of performance is 1 year for planning grants. That would start 9/1/23 and run to 8/31/24, only 12 months. For cost reimbursement, it is a 3-year cycle. You would be submitting your budget for year 1 of that 3-year cycle. Okay. All right, next. Okay. You will need to submit electronically via eGrants, the AmeriCorps web-based application system. Now, eGrants is not grants.gov, so you will need to kind of develop your stuff, your narratives in Word. I generally recommend setting up your budget in an Excel form and then kind of transferring that information over into eGrants. Okay, you don't upload into the eGrants, so just be aware of that. Don't wait till the last minute. And you need to make sure that whoever is submitting is the person who's the authorized representative. Okay, and they need to have their account. So contact eGrants if you don't have an eGrants account. And there's a hotline that can help you with that as well. If you have problems, again, contact our commission. We'll try to help out as well. All right, but check first with the hotline. Okay, a complete application must include the following elements. Okay, so you're going to have your face sheet. So when you first go into eGrants, that's basically information about your agency address, you know, those kinds of your EIN number, all of those things, your contact people, you know, and all of that. Then you're going to have to see your narrative section is going to be comprised of the following: an executive summary, okay, a program design, and we're going to go into more detail in this in a little bit further on. You're going to talk about your organizational capability and your cost effectiveness and budget adequacy. Your logic model will also be a separate link in eGrants that you will be filling out. If you're a planning grant, you do not need to fill this out. You will just be going into that link and putting NA. Okay, so don't worry about filling out the logic model. Performance measures are also not required by planning grants, but you will need to go into the performance measures section, and there are specific instructions of the information you'll need to put in there. It's kind of putting zeros and NAs in those fields, because what happens is if that section is um, not filled out, it will not let you submit in eGrants. Okay, so if you are having problems with your performance measure section, let me know, and I can kind of go in there and help you out with that. But try to follow the instructions so that you can actually get this in submitted in. Standard form 424A budget, you will need to have a budget. And these other fields, continuation, changes, clarifications, and authorization I'm sorry, continuation, changes, and clarification, those are also links in the narratives. You're just going to put NA in there, okay? Because that's kind of like for future use. And then your authorization, assurances, and certifications are things that you'll just kind of like look at the end. That'll be the last link before you actually submit. Okay. All right. Page limitations. Okay. There are two sections with mandatory page limitations. One is the narrative section, and then the other one is the logic model. Now, if you're a planning grant, don't worry again, as I mentioned about the logic model, just put NA in those fields. The application must not exceed 10 pages for the narrative. Okay, so you have up to 10 pages. That does include your face sheet. So you actually only have 9 pages of, you know, narrative data, narrative information, where you're going to talk about the design of your program. In determining whether an application complies with page limits, the corporation, or America, I should have changed that, will count the following for the narrative. So the narrative consists of the executive summary, which is basically it's cut and paste information, and then it's the face sheet, and then the narrative portions contains the program design, the organizational capacity, and the cost effectiveness and budget adequacy section of the application. All right, then you will go into your review tab, which is another link, okay, and just make sure that you take a look at the narrative section there and make sure that it doesn't exceed. So what counts as 10 pages is according to the review tab link. All right. So don't think that if you did it on a Word document that that's going to be 10 pages. It doesn't count it that way. It'll count it according to however eGrants presents it. Okay. The application page limit does not include the budget, the narrative portion of the evaluation plan, if one is required, the logic model, performance measures, or or any supplementary information. So that's basically, sorry about that. That's basically what that is. Let's see what else. Go to the next one. Okay, the logic model does not apply to planning grants, as I mentioned. For those of you who are operating or recompeting programs, it can't exceed 3 pages. Okay, so just make sure that that section doesn't go over the 3 pages. Okay. Okay, go to the next one. Okay, your notice of intent to apply, as I mentioned, is on March 16th, and you will submit your information to our link. And that's going to be, you have to give us your contact name, address, and so on, and the focus area you plan to address. Okay. All right. Applications must be submitted on eGrants no later than Tuesday, March 28th. Next. Additional documents. So the financial management survey, as required by all applicants, the evaluation briefs, reports, studies, please refer to the evidence-based section for detailed instructions by evidence tier. So Only operating grants need to worry about any evaluation briefs, reports, or studies. Okay, so you don't need to worry about that if you're a planning grant, but you will have to submit to us the financial management survey. And follow instructions on page 12 of the formula NOFO on how to submit those additional documents. Okay, next. Okay. Your UEI, unique entity identifier, make sure all of this is up to date, because if it's not, and the name of your organization does not match exactly, we will not be able to award you. So just make sure that those things are up to date. Okay. Next. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the planning grant application first before I get into the recompeting operating grant information. So if you're operating, you know, like I said, take a 5-minute break, do whatever you need to do, come back to us for that section. Okay, this should take about 5 to 10 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. All right, performance measures, anticipated outcomes. So in order to receive funding, a planning grant staff consultant must agree to engage in the following during their year of planning. These are the requirements for planning grants. You need to be committed to developing a high quality operating grant application during the competitive and formula NOFO periods in 23-24. So what we're asking here is, please be intentional in your desire to have an AmeriCorps program. We're not looking for, and we've had this is one of the downfalls of planning grants. We've had organizations that just come in, they want the 85, that there was 70, at that time, $75,000, because it kind of helps their current administrative, whatever, to bring on staff or whatever. And then they don't submit, you know, an application for operating. So, if you clearly do want to make sure that you try to get an AmeriCorps program, this is for you. Definitely, it's a great opportunity. Meet virtually with a designated New Jersey Commission staff member who will act as their program liaison on a regular basis, typically twice a month. Sometimes in the beginning, it'll be more than twice a month to kind of give that, you know, give that support. But you need to be committed to those meetings with your program officer at the commission. Attend all New Jersey Commission events. So planning grant staff, whether it's a permanent staff on the organization or a consultant or whatever they hire, they need to attend all of this to get a good idea of what AmeriCorps is all about. They need to attend Starting Strong, launch. We have a launch, which is a celebratory it's kind of the swearing in of the AmeriCorps members. It always takes place in October. Career Day, which generally takes place in March. Our end of year, which is either in May or in June. The Mid-Atlantic Regional Conference, which is either a car drive or a plane ride to some other state. This year it's in West Virginia, and it's for 2 or 3 days, I believe. So, you know, there need to be funds budgeted for that, and we need to have at least one person from each program attend that. And any other New Jersey Commission sponsored events during the planning year. So there are some years on, it's generally like biannual or every other year. We generally have the governor's volunteerism conference. So we expect programs to attend that as well. Participate in all New Jersey Commission scheduled monthly program director calls. So we have a program director call once a month. You need to participate in that as well. Go to the next one. Participate in all New Jersey Commission scheduled trainings for program directors throughout the planning year. So if we do a training for program directors, the expectation is they attend that as well. Agree to visit a minimum of 3 existing AmeriCorps programs, which will be selected by the New Jersey Commission staff. So planning grants will go to 3 different, throughout the year, 3 different organizations, visit with those programs to see how their AmeriCorps program is operating. We'll generally pick out programs that have been seasoned, that either have very good systems or whatever, or have good strengths in certain areas. But that is an expectation that you will be required to meet as well. Agree to meet with staff from the Center for Research and Evaluation in Education and Human Services, which is at Montclair State University, to develop an evidence-informed program design, including a theory of change, evidence, logic model, and performance measures that will be used as part of the 2024-25 operating grant application. Minimum of $10,000. Okay, and this is something new for this year. A minimum of $10,000 needs to be budgeted for this training. Now, You can budget the whole amount for Montclair to work out a series of sessions to develop these. So let's say, for instance, your first session will be developing your theory of change, your second session, your evidence, and so on. Okay, $10,000 needs to be, and the reason we do this is because this is the hardest part of AmeriCorps, is really grasping and understanding these elements to get a successful application. So we really want to make not only a time commitment, but also a monetary investment in this as well. You can also use some of these funds to so AmeriCorps, not AmeriCorps National, the Association of State Commissions has a whole directory of TA providers that also do some of this work. So you could use some funds for that as well. Okay, so, but you're going to have to make some kind of an investment in the training for this so that you can actually write a great application. Provide a minimum match of at least 24% cash and or in kind, and seek commitments for match in the operating grant application. So how this works is for the first 3 years of a cycle, the program has to provide 24% cash or in kind, or a combination of both, match. Now, this past year, we had match waivers in place. So many of our programs were able to actually not have match or have reduced levels of match. It's been a simplified process this year. I am not sure yet what's going to happen next year because I've not been advised about that, but I assume that there will also be some kind of a waiver in place for that match. So we will keep programs informed of that as well.
Is that question, this is for the planning grants?
Yes,
as well? Okay.
this is for planning grants as well. Yep. Submit quarterly progress and fiscal reports in the New Jersey Commission's Encore system. So we have a new system this year that's called Encore, and that's where you will be, providing your progress reports and fiscal reports as well. Okay, next. Okay, planning grants. So what can a planning grant fund? Planning grants can provide funding for staff, consultant time, travel, and other costs related to work developing the program design, the grant application itself, develop stakeholder commitment. So let's say, for instance, you want to hold a local meeting in your community. You're going to bring in different stakeholders to see who you want to set up a partnership with, maybe as a service site, or maybe just, basically to support your program in terms of resources. If you want to have a meeting and you want to bring some food or whatever, so that, you can talk about your program, those are costs that are allowable under this planning grant. Participate in training related to AmeriCorps program management, and this would result in the potential program applicant to have a stronger application and program than had they not had the planning grant. So examples of grant line items: expenses, there may be others, staffing, consultants, benefits, office space, travel, training sessions, conferences. Some commissions require planning grants to send one staff person to their events. As I mentioned before, we do require that. And allow use for planning program stakeholder meetings, room supplies, lunch, and so on. Okay, next. Okay, so here's the criteria for planning grants. Your program design, as you can see, is the equivalent of 50 points. You will need to attain 75 points to get funded. This is a much simplified criteria than it is for a regular operating program. And I'll go through this quickly. So the problem to be addressed is 10 points. Theory of change statement is 15 points. The future use of AmeriCorps members in an operating grants intervention. We want to know what your thinking is in terms of how you would use your AmeriCorps members. That's 10 points. And then your timeline. You're going to develop a timeline with different benchmarks. Things like development of your theory of change, development of your evidence, development of a budget, meeting with stakeholders, so you're going to have some kind of a timeline, and we'll talk a little bit about what those elements can be. And then your organizational capabilities, of course, most of you have been grant writers. Most of you have done different applications. This is basically where you talk about all the great and wonderful things your organization does on the community and how it's got developed expertise and those kinds of things in your focus areas and so on. And then the last thing is your cost effectiveness and budget adequacy. Okay, so we'll go through that a little bit. Problem to be addressed, describe the existing problem you would address in an AmeriCorps or operating grant. Explain why the problem is prevalent and severe in communities where the program plans to serve. Provide cited relevant studies and data supporting the problem. Identify causes of the problem, including the role of current or historical inequities faced by underserved communities may play in contributing to the problem. Next. Okay, for 15 points, a theory of change statement. Now, we understand that during the planning process of, planning grant process that year, you're going to really develop a good theory of change. Right now, what we are asking for is a theory of change that is kind of a vision that an initial vision that you would have of what the problem, what the intervention, and what you expect to, what you anticipate would be the outcomes that you hope to achieve. So it's very broad. Describe how the program proposed intervention, and what we mean by intervention. An intervention is basically the activities the AmeriCorps members are going to undertake. Okay, so if they're going to be doing training in how to get a job, for instance, they're going to be doing a session of, 10 sessions on how to get a job or whatever that is. Those are the activities that those AmeriCorps members is going to be. That's going to be your intervention. That's going to be like what you're actually doing with those what those AmeriCorps members will be doing to actually achieve that outcome. Okay. Describe how the intervention is likely to lead to the outcomes identified in the theory of change, and describe how the expected outcomes articulated in the application narrative represent meaningful progress in addressing the community problem you have identified. Okay. Okay, future use of AmeriCorps members in an operating grants intervention, 10 points. Describe the role of AmeriCorps members in a future operating grant, okay? And if applicable, leverage volunteers. So oftentimes AmeriCorps expects the programs to also leverage volunteers to assist with the AmeriCorps members in a particular area. So let's say, for instance, it's a tutoring program and your AmeriCorps members are going to actually be doing the tutoring, but they may leverage some volunteers, such as parents, to assist in that process. They may actually help to manage some of those volunteers as well. So that's how you envision that. Describe the rationale for utilizing AmeriCorps members to develop the intervention. Describe how the service role of AmeriCorps members will produce significant contributions to existing efforts to address the stated problem. And then provide an estimated number of AmeriCorps members who will deliver the intervention. So how many members, how large a cadre of AmeriCorps members do you anticipate requesting? Okay, next. Okay, now you're planning activities timeline. Okay, so these are the elements that that in a timeline of activities that you will undertake throughout your planning grant year to develop your infrastructure for a future application and operating program. Elements of the timeline should include at a minimum the following elements. These elements do not need to be developed at the time of the planning grant submission, but just during the planning grant phase. In other words, right now, we don't need to know what your logic model is going to look like, but we do need to know what is your time frame for developing that logic model, okay? So what is your time frame for development for doing your evidence-based core activities? So that would include things like the duration of the intervention, flushing out the dosage of the intervention, and flushing out the target population. So all of that, like what is your idea of, your planning timeline for that? Is it going to be early on? And again, for me, the way I generally recommend to programs is you want to start out with your theory of change, your evidence, that's kind of like the crux of your application. So you want to do that early on in September and start right off the bat with planning that segment. Go to the next one. Okay. You're going to identify by when do you expect to have your performance measures developed? By when do you expect to have a plan for data collection to report progress in performance measures? And your data collection will be identifying what instruments. You may decide that you're going to use some kind of a package that's already, available on the market, or you may want to develop your own package for, doing data collection. as long as, you know, as long as it's credible. And your plan for creating an advisory board of stakeholders. So when do you anticipate that will be, you know, something you'll be working on? Your plan for identifying potential community partners and service sites, a plan for organizational capacities such as site supervisor training, oversight, program evaluation, and those kinds of things in your program year. A plan for recruitment, selection, orientation, and content training, and supervision, support, and retention of members. So, you know, you're going to basically develop some kind of a recruitment plan, how your criteria for selection. So are you going to be looking for college graduates, for instance, or are you going to be looking for, you know, individuals who have at least 2 years of college, or maybe they don't require college, you know, college education, or maybe you're looking for someone with certain leadership capacities, you know, flushing out whatever that criteria is going to be for selecting. And are you going to have a panel of interviewers selecting those members, or, you know, however you're going to do that? How will you orient them? So an orientation plan, content training plan. So if they're going to be doing, for instance, if it's an environmental program, you know, what are you going to train them in? Are you going to train them in water quality testing, biological streams develop, you know, biological testing, whatever that is. So this is where you actually are going to develop your plan. And the plan for inclusion and diversity in members and beneficiaries, including the participation in the Commission's Diversity Council or development of a host agency diversity council. So diversity is a very big thing in AmeriCorps. So how are you going to plan on what your cadre is going to what they're going to be consist of in terms of diversity? And that could be a number of different areas. That could be disabilities, uh, that could be race, that could be religion, whatever that consists of. But what is your diversity council going to be? We at the commission do have a diversity council, so it could be as something as simple as, you know, we will recruit somebody to, or we will have you know, certain staff participate in those monthly meetings as well at the commission, whatever that is. Okay, so the next slide. Um, Plan for career building and leadership development of members. So during your operating year, what do you anticipate to be your plan for helping AmeriCorps members to achieve life after AmeriCorps? You know, what are they working towards? How are you going to develop them as leaders? What kind of training will you provide for them as leaders? Creation of an operating budget and details. So by when do you anticipate having a finalized budget for this program? Plan for securing in-kind and cash match for 23-24 planning grant and for the 24-25 operating year. So, you know, what is your plan for securing match, and what's your timeline for that? Again, you don't need to develop the plan itself. We just need to know what your timeline for planning is. What is your timeline for planning for the development of the forms and templates that you're going to need to support your program operations? Generally, this is kind of like the last couple of months. So you'll get a lot of this information at Starting Strong, which is in July of your planning grant year. So some of this can take place during that latter part of your planning grant year. And then the completion of draft application for the formula. Will also be, what is your timeline for having that completed? And then incorporate the following into your planning timeline, which are monthly check-in calls with the commission staff, your monthly program manager calls with the commission, and then commission and ask trainings and events as outlined in the NOFO as well. Okay, so basically your timeline. Okay. Organizational background and staffing. Again, this is where you talk about, you know, who's going to be implementing the program, what do you envision, your agency's experience, you know, information about, you know, all of the information that you have to have updated for New Jersey's charities registration, your UEI numbers, and so on. And then a commitment to AmeriCorps requirements for 5 points. The organization agrees to adhere to all AmeriCorps rules and regulations included in the AmeriCorps terms and commitments, prohibited activities, and criminal history check policies. Just so that you know, if you have staff on your agency that's going to be working on this planning grant, before they get paid by funds from this planning grant, they have to be cleared by our commission in terms of their criminal history checks. Okay, and there are three checks that are required. I think Vinny talked a little bit about this in his presentation, but that is a requirement even for planning grants. Okay. Next. Okay. Budget, again, basically some of the accounting principles, costs are allowable, reasonable, allocable. Budget is submitted with adequate information. You know, you break down your costs. I will have a sample budget for planning grants. And we will also make sure to see that the $10,000 for training in theory of change is also allocated there as well. Okay. Next. Okay, creating. Okay, so when you go to create your application in eGrants, you're going to go to the section 5. It's in the table of contents of the NOFA. You'll see the link, or you could use this link basically to get to the application instructions. Are you going to follow the instructions listed in the table of contents for new applicants with the following exceptions? For the logic model, you're just going to put NA in all the fields. For the budget, the planning grants do not require costs for AmeriCorps members, so you're only going to fill out sections 1 and 3. Do not enter costs for section 2, which are the member costs. And then your performance measures, I have specific instructions on planning grants, on performance measures for planning grants in the NOFA. So just make sure you follow that instead of the performance measures instructions in the application instructions. Okay. All right. So I'm done with planning grants. Are there any questions for the planning grant folks on that? Crickets? Okay, I must have been very thorough. If you still have questions at the end of this next section, please, you can certainly, ask them. Now, after the TA, I generally don't answer questions about your design. I will answer technical questions, but you really, this is the forum to ask, if there's anything about your particular design, because we don't want to give, unfair advantage to any one agencies applying. So, okay, section 3,
I do
operating.
have a question. This is Marie Delusma Chase.
Hi, Marie. Haven't seen you in a long time.
Yeah, it's been over 10 years.
Yeah, nice. Welcome back.
Thank you. Do you support consortium planning grants?
When you say consortium, you mean there needs to be a lead agency.
Yeah, a
Okay.
lead agency with like educational consortium.
We don't have, I mean, whoever you're going to pick as your partners, you can certainly do that. Yes. But again, the maximum amount that we will fund is $85,000.
Understood.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
thank
Okay. Section 3. Now, this is only for recompeting. So typically, the one thing I do want to mention, if you have applied for a competitive to the competitive NOFO this past fall, realize that the criteria here is the points are different. And there are some sections, particularly under the member experience, that have been altered. So please read this. Do not assume that what you submitted in the competitive application, that you can just submit the same exact application. Because if you miss some of the questions that are in this formula criteria, you will lose points. So I'm just putting that out there. Make sure that you look at this because we simplify the formula application process over the competitive, because the competitive is kind of a very prescriptive criteria that's developed by AmeriCorps National. And we want to be able, and it's very difficult sometimes for someone that's, trying that to apply for that. So we try to make this a little bit of a simpler process in our formula. So just be aware that the points are different. I did not put as many points for theory of change, logic model, evidence here. And I did put in more under member experience. We also put in points for reviewing your performance measures at 8 points. So just be aware of that. Okay, so go to the next section. Okay, the executive summary that's required is this portion here. You're going to just copy and paste this and basically just fill it in with your information. Okay, so this is pretty straightforward. There's no points for this. Okay, so the next one. Okay, I'm not going to go over theory of change, logic model, evidence tier, and evidence quality. I'm going to ask you to please attend the one on the 22nd. Again, that will also be a recorded session. She will take a deep dive. Erin generally runs that from CREES, and they do take a deep dive into this area. If you are recompeting, you should have an idea already of what this entails. And we've done a lot of work with our programs for this. Okay, let's see. We have a question. Yvette, you mentioned that the 24% for planning grants can be waived. Please clarify. You need to put 24% match in your planning grant budget. If you are selected and you submit to us a request for match waiver, it needs to then go to AmeriCorps National. They will review it, and if they agree to waive it, then we would waive that match. But for the application, you will need to have match either cash or in kind for the planning grant application. Okay. All right, go to the next one. Next field or next thing. Okay, so here's the theory of change. Again, I'm not going to go into this a lot, but just basically you should know that your theory of change consists of a problem, your intervention, which is the activities of the AmeriCorps members, and then the outcomes that you want to achieve. Go to the next slide. Okay, as I mentioned, for the planning grants, it should demonstrate meaningful progress. You should include the rationale for utilizing AmeriCorps members to deliver the intervention as well. So this is for recompeting programs, okay, just to make sure that you understand. Okay, the next one. Okay, as you know, the logic model, okay, and again, planning grants don't do this, but recompeting, you will identify your community problem, your inputs, which is all of your resources that you're putting into this, and that could be locations, sites, the number of AmeriCorps members who develop the intervention, curriculum, it could be match, whatever those inputs are, those resources that you're putting into the program. The core activities of the interventions, basically, and this is the big downfall always of programs that write their logic models. Sometimes they're missing the duration, the dosage, and the target population, not so much, but duration and dosage really need to be specified. So again, not for planning grants, you're not going to fill out the logic model, but you will fill it out if you're a recompete. Okay, go to the next one. Okay, if you're using national performance measures in the performance measures section, please indicate which ones you're using. They generally have like a little number. Okay, so for instance, if it's education, it's generally E1 and E5. That's your aligned performance measure. So just write in, my output is E1, number of students tutored, and E5, increases in increases in educational attainment or academic achievement of the students, something of that nature. But just make sure that you put in the number of the national performance measures that you do. Okay, go to the next one. Okay, your evidence tiers. Okay, I'm going to let CREES answer this. Please look at the sections for your evidence tier for 4 points. They will either be preliminary, moderate, or strong. Your preliminary basically means that you're informed. You have evidence that your approach to developing your design will work based on these studies. If it's preliminary, it's more based on performance measures that you've already measured. We have this evidence that this approach works, and based on this particular thing, and based on studies that we're looking at, and this is how our study, how our approach compares to those studies. This is how it matches, and so on and so forth. And then your moderate and your strong ones are basically, using control groups, using more sophisticated national studies and those kinds of things. So it's a little bit more involved. Most of our new programs will generally apply for pre-preliminary, but again, because you are doing a planning grant this time, you will not need to identify your evidence tier yet. You will be working on identifying that evidence tier for an operating program. Okay, next. Okay, your evidence quality has to do with basically for 8 points, your methodology, the methodology of the evidence you're presenting, whether or not it's relatively recent within the last 6 years, and how meaningful and what kind of effect it had on your beneficiaries. Okay, go to the next one. For your performance measures at 8 points, hold on one second. Let me see, okay. For your performance measures, again, you need to have at least one aligned performance measures. Please refer to the performance measures instructions. There is a checklist there that you should go through to make sure that your performance measures sections are complete. Okay, and the instructions for how to fill out that performance measures section is in these instructions. Okay, so recompeting programs, again, look at that to guide you on how you get your performance measures there. Okay. All right. Now for member experience. Okay, so this is one of the sections that we've generally identified as having more points than in previous competitive applications. So describe the rationale by which you selected the number of members and slot types for your program. Describe how you plan to conduct the onboarding process and orientation on the first day of service to your cadre of members, okay, and include training topics to be included in the orientation, including training on prohibited activities. AmeriCorps members, as a result of their service, will have an opportunity to develop as leaders. So what kind of leadership training are you providing for them? Some of our programs teach the AmeriCorps members on how to facilitate meetings, how to lead meetings, decision-making processes, a lot of different, some use a curriculum on leadership, some bring in speakers, whatever however you want to develop that part of it. And then the other one will be, how will your members gain skills as a result of their training that can be useful to future employers in the future? And describe your career exploration process for transitioning to life after AmeriCorps. So for instance, one of our programs puts into the member agreement that they have to interview 3 different individuals, professionals within their organization on how they selected their career, why they chose that particular career, what works for them, what doesn't work for, those kinds of things. So it's part of career exploration. There's all kinds of packages. They could be doing Myers-Briggs. They could be doing whatever that is, whatever that entails, to help them identify, what they want to pursue after life, after AmeriCorps. Okay. The program has a well-defined plan to recruit. Somebody had a question? Okay. The program has a well-defined plan to recruit AmeriCorps members from the geographic or demographic communities in which the programs operate. Describe what a typical day will look like for your members. Fostering an inclusive service culture. How are you going to build esprit de corps within your cadre of members? And the applicant's organization or program has a diversity, equity, and inclusion council, as I mentioned before. Okay, next. Okay, then we're talking about organizational background and staffing, and I'm going to leave it here. Let's go to the next couple of slides. You can read this on your own. It's pretty much the same stuff that we've had in the past. Just be aware that AmeriCorps members, as Vinny mentioned, cannot supervise other AmeriCorps members. Okay, so just be aware of that. Okay, cost effectiveness and budget adequacy. Again, all of the same things as with the planning grant. The only thing is that you will be allocating costs for the AmeriCorps members. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Evaluation, if you're recompeting, okay, and you're applying for your next 3-year cycle, you need to have an evaluation plan. Okay, so you're gonna fill that field out. And if you've been functioning in as of 6 years, you should have an evaluation report and send that as an attachment as well. So if you're recompeting for your next 3-year cycle, years 7, 8, and 9, you should have some kind of an evaluation report that you've done, you know, on your program for the prior 6 years. Okay, go to the next one. Okay, so these are the terms of service and living stipend amounts for this year. You can, and I strongly recommend that you go higher than the minimum, because you know we're not able to compete. A lot of our programs can't compete with the stipend amounts of AmeriCorps with, you know, what they can get in a job outside. So take a look at that. The cost per MSY is at 27,000. That's the maximum. So you, as an AmeriCorps operating program, have a little bit more leeway than in the past to actually provide for a higher stipend for your AmeriCorps members. You can go as high as 35,200. A lot of programs, you know, they get foundation money that helps to augment their stipends for their members. And they tend to be very successful. Some programs also provide housing, and that would have to be part of the figured into the maximum living allowance cost. Here you have in the first column, you have the type of member positions. We have all the way up to abbreviated. For some of you who are coming back to AmeriCorps, just be aware that the 100 hours is kind of a new slot type. And it's generally used by colleges that want to do service with their AmeriCorps members, who want to do not work study, who want to do service during spring break and winter break, and gain some, you know, some AmeriCorps dollars in terms of a stipend and in terms of an education award. And then, of course, the MSYs, the breakdown for your MSYs are here. So for instance, minimum time members would do 300 hours, and the corresponding MSY would be 0.212. So you would get a little bit less than 1 MSY for 4 minimum time members. Okay, not 5. 5 will take you right over that 1 cost per MSY for 1 full-time equivalent. And then the minimum total living allowance, you can propose higher. Okay, but we recommend at least these amounts. You have to provide the full-time, at least a minimum of 17,600 for full-time. Okay. All right, next one. The match requirements, this has not changed over the years. We have programs that are already at year 10 and they continue to have to provide 50% match. Again, this past year, many of them submitted match waivers. So this was often reduced to maybe 33% or 24%, or some that are like down, like in this area, some of them didn't even have to provide match. So, okay. But for this application, you do need to submit it. If you're requesting 12 or less MSYs, the commission will not take any funds for administrative costs. If you have 13 to 17 MSYs, you will allocate 1% of your administrative allowance to the commission using this formula. And if you have 18 or more MSYs, you should allocate 2%. Okay, so that's just for the commission for budgeting. Go to the next one. Okay, here's the link. Basically, for the table of contents, go to the table of contents for all the different sections of the NOFA, just to make sure that you complete the application correctly. Go to the next one. Next link. Okay, Vinny talked a little bit about all of our different events and so on. I'm not going to go over them. They're pretty much here. But just be aware that there are costs to some of these. Go to the next one. AmeriCorps launch, end of year. We don't charge, you know, registration for these, but travel is something you're going to need to, you know, allocate funds for. Okay, next one. Okay, and these are just additional resources, and the regulations for AmeriCorps are contained within ecfr.gov. And you can access that here. The AmeriCorps.gov website offers a lot of information. You may want to visit that just to get more information on AmeriCorps. They have all kinds of instructions, checklists, frequently asked questions that can be helpful as well. And that's it. So any questions on any of that? Okay.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
It might be a silly question, but what is the difference between a continuation applicant and a recompeting?
Okay, so a recompeting, okay, so AmeriCorps, when we give an award for an operating grant, it's a 3-year award, okay? So in year 1 of that application, after the AmeriCorps program does year 1, they would be submitting a continuation application for their year 2 program. And then in year 2, they would be applying for a continuation also for their year 3. Now in year 3, they would then have to be submitting for a recompeting application for the next 3-year cycle. Okay, that's how that works.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. All right, any other questions, anyone? Okay, we are available. You know, let me just, I will post, let's see if I can post it. Let me see, share screen. Hold on. Do I have it here? Yeah. Okay. Does everyone see this? It's a planning grant sample budget. Okay, so for those of you who are new to AmeriCorps, this is just a sample of an AmeriCorps budget that you can develop just to give you an idea of, you know, how this works. Okay, so now this one is only based on $75,000, which is what we were allocating, and it doesn't include the $10,000 for the technical assistance piece. But it kind of gives you an idea of how you'll be developing this information in your actual budget. Okay, so I will post that to our website and have that available for you as well. Okay?
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right, everyone. Actually, Vinny, is there another way we can share that with our planning grants? Do you know?
If we can email everyone here.
Just email. Okay.
Yeah,
All
we can
right,
send
great.
it directly.
Okay.
Hi,
awesome.
Ahmad.
Hey, Vinny, how you doing? I actually have a quick question. The timeline. Are we going to receive that via email? Is that going to be on the AmeriCorps website?
What timeline? Oh, the timeline in the NOFA?
Yeah.
The timeline is in the NOFA. Have you received the NOFA? Have you gone to our website?
Yeah, I've gone to the website. Okay, you know what? I'm sorry. You're right.
If you look in the NOFA, the timeline is there.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. And then remember, Ahmad, it's for formula. Okay. Not competitive. All right. So
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
All righty. No problem.
If you have trouble, Ahmad, we can send it again. Just let us know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
You'll all have
and
questions. I
this-
know.
The PowerPoint, today's PowerPoint will also be available on the website. So you can refer to this PowerPoint as well. Just so that you know. Okay. Any other questions, everyone? I just want to just kind of end this by saying, I know it's very involved. AmeriCorps is an involved program. It's not the easiest to administer, but I have to say, we've had programs come back. Those programs that have been very successful and have found them very useful to have their AmeriCorps members come to us year after year after year. So it is a very rewarding program. You know, I always say I have the best job in the world because it is a great program to run. It's, you know, putting people out there in the community to do service. So, you know, what greater thing is there than that? So I just, you know, take a look at this, see if it's for you, see if it's for your organization. And, you know, hopefully we'll hear from you. Okay.
Yvette, this is a very difficult kind of thing that you just did, going through this very incredibly complicated thing using Zoom, where it's just so damn impersonal. You did a great job.
Thank you. Thank you, Connie.
You
That means
really
a lot
did.
to me coming from someone like you
You really
who've been in
did.
the field for a while doing this.
Yeah. So thank you for making it digestible.
And again, anyone, you could always shoot us questions, you could shoot us an email, whatever. We do try to get back as soon as possible. We're being monitored as we speak this year, in the next couple of months. So, if you find that you don't get an answer, just send us a reminder email, because sometimes, we do get a little derailed. Okay,
Yeah.
but hopefully you'll get an answer right away.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Vinny, you want to close up?
Yeah, thank you. It's nice to see familiar faces and meet new faces. Like Yvette said, if there's any questions, just reach out to us directly. We'll make sure that we help you along without preferential treatment as you apply for the NOFO. But there's a lot of information in there, and I swear it takes about like 3 cycles to really digest it and understand. So if there's some new faces here, some of you already have operating grants, but it's always like brand spanking new every time. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day and long weekend.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you. Vinny, can you stay on for a
Have a
minute?
good one, everyone.
Bye, everyone.